on to the next panel. It's time now for our second panel of the day. Is the communications industry ageist?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Sparrow. That I actually, I don't know whether or not I have an answer for that, given that, I was at Ogilvy, but maybe we were. Anyway, the panel, I'm not in advertising anymore, so I can say that. The panel is presented by Cummins & Partners. Please welcome Kirsty Muddle, the founding partner and managing director of Cummins & Partners Australia, to introduce the panel and panellists to the stage.
I think you can probably tell you're in for a bit of a ride with this. These guys are fun. I just spent 5 minutes listening to them, didn't get a word in. This is an incredibly interesting topic for us because probably about 6 months ago, a few people walked through our agency and they said, and I find this hysterical, but they went, I think I just saw a 40-year-old. It's like, really, a 40-year-old? We've got 150 staff and about a quarter of them are over 40. There's a fair few over 50, but we've only got 2 people over 60, so we strongly believe we need to improve that. And we're trying to. It's important to us and it's important for the industry to maintain that wisdom, but also how do we connect with over a third of the population if we don't have that wisdom sitting within our agency? It's what advertising and media and communications people do for our clients. It wasn't just a novelty though. I think it seems from a report that was published last week, I think it was, by B&T and Honeycomb, that 81% of the industry is under 45 years of age and 55% of the industry is under 35. And so it's not, I thought that person was a little bit weird and their comment was weird, but it actually seems to be a systemic problem in our industry. Who knows why? That's what these guys are going to talk about. So I would love to introduce Rebbecca Wilson, who will be the Ageism panel moderator. She's the CEO of Starts at 60. Rebbecca is the founder of, Rebbecca is the founder of not just the CEO of Starts at 60, which is the largest digital and social media brand and platform for over 60s. Oh, there you are. Julia Zaetta, who is the editor-in-chief of Better Homes and Gardens. Charmaine has a magazine career of over 39 years. What did I say? I'm so sorry. I'm pregnant. It's slightly distracting. Julia has 39 years under her belt, and she is truly a major and enduring force in the Australian publishing industry. Charmaine Moldrich, who is the CEO of the Outdoor Media Association. Charmaine has 30 years' experience in leadership management, marketing, communications and business development across a variety of sectors. And a sprained ankle. Do you need some help? No, okay.
I have to use the stairs.
And Sparrow, who is formerly known as Greg Graham. He's the founder of the Nest Consultancy, but Sparrow spent 40 years in the industry. He's also worked for a number of high-profile creative and media agencies. I've actually worked with Sparrow before. He's amazing. He is also Australia's #1 influencer in the advertising and media category on LinkedIn. And of course, and finally, this is going to be funny, and Carrie Barker, global partner and Sydney MD at The Projects. Carrie is one of the few female owners of a creative agency here in Australia and is secretly over 50. Shh, don't tell anyone. But she firmly believes that her age and experience empower her, but it does not define her. She listens to Post Malone, shops at Topshop, drinks Archie Rose and wears Reebok classics. Truly very cool. Please enjoy.
Thank you. Well, what a crowd. What a crowd have we got here today. And I think the most fun part of talking to you today is hitting the real bones these guys are now going to talk about. The baby boomer market is one that's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think I'm sitting in front of the most esteemed people in the industry today, and I don't reckon I'm going to get a word in edgewise. But 80% of financial assets, 53% of consumer spending is controlled by this demographic. And yet when I say to you, baby boomer, over 60, older generation, what do you see in your mind as media people?
I'm not your grandfather.
Yeah, do you see your grandma? Retired? How many of you are retired?
No fucking way.
Right. How many of society today in that 80% of financial assets have stopped living their lives?
Not a lot. And the interesting thing is that only 10% of marketing is directed towards baby boomers, despite the fact that the over 60s have 80% of the revenue.
I know.
which
It's
is just
frightening, isn't
amazing.
it?
Can I just say before you start
Go,
that I'm going to
Julia.
be a little bit I'm going to be a bit hamstrung here because I have my 2 HR managers right there. So if I
Conflict of
swear-
interest.
Those
Conflict of
youngsters over
interest.
there.
Those youngsters
Those
there.
whippersnappers.
And I get into trouble for my language all the time at work. So
Great, so let's have some fun.
Just
It's my job to
please.
keep it going.
yes.
All
Don't take it back to the office, ladies, all right? Devan and Antoinette, right there.
So we're going to have some fun today because we're going to talk about the things people don't talk about. All right, and how many of you guys feel the industry is ageist?
It is just frightening from my perspective. Sorry, ladies, please. How often the word millennials comes up in my workplace with what we're doing. And it drives me absolutely crazy because the sense is if you market anywhere beyond the millennials, and let's go below to Gen Z as well, if you market anywhere below the millennials or above the millennials, you're going to be seen as old. And if you're seen as old, you are, to put it as Barrow would say, you are fucked. So it is so ageist and so terrible, it's unbelievable, from my point of view.
So, Carrie, you have a really strong opinion on this. I'm going to ask you to come in. Why is everyone targeting millennials?
Yeah, it's interesting in the project's creative agency, I would say 98% of the briefs that we deal with are targeting millennials. And as you said, there are more people over 45 to 60 than millennials, and people over 40 have got more money than millennials. So it just doesn't seem to make sense. But I think that the reason for that is because the majority of the advertising industry, the majority of people in agencies, the majority of clients are under 35. And I think they can't actually contemplate that somebody in their 40s, God forbid 50s, and you're probably dead
You're
at
looking
60.
at me now. Yeah, I'm dead. Yeah.
You know, could have money or be out seeing Post Malone or shopping at Topshop or drinking Archie Rose or going out night clubbing or going to festivals using technology and so on. And I think as an older demographic, we're pigeonholed. We have ads targeting bowel cancer, retirement, and when a
homes.
campaign does target me, it's a couple. Oh, Carrie must like travelling because she's over 50. It'll be a couple jumping off a cliff, holding hands, smiling
In white
It's
pants.
like-
In white pants.
God,
Always in white
it's
pants.
so annoying. So I think as an industry, because people within the industry are so young, we actually can't see beyond that. And it was interesting actually. Last week, finally, I got a brief, and it was for a radio station, and they're targeting 40 to 54-year-olds. And the client was about 25, really gorgeous girl. And I asked her, well, why are you stopping at 54? And she kind of stopped and was like, that was, you know, a really difficult question. She was like, oh, I don't know, I never thought about it. And she said, well, I suppose they, over 55s, they're quite old, aren't they? And I suppose they don't really have any money, and I suppose they just don't change brands. I didn't want to tell her I was 56. I was like, oh, really? Yeah, maybe. But, you know, it was just... And that was the view of a 25-year-old, and I think there is a responsibility to us as employers to have older people meet in my agency when I'm talking to my young team going, guys, you've got to sort of change your thinking.
As an industry, though, radio ratings stop at 54.
Yeah.
You don't get rated over 54.
Oh,
Nielsen
that's why
stops
then.
at 60.
That'd
Yeah.
be why.
You do not measure this audience past the age of 1950.
And you
Right,
can't
that
go
you-
on Tinder if you're over 60.
Really?
Yep.
How do you know this?
Saying.
But don't you think...
Maybe they falsify their age in my community then, because I know there's a couple on Tinder.
I was going to say, they all lie about their age on Tinder.
But most of the media people are in a bubble. They're in a bubble that's not realistic.
Do you think the bubble can pop?
Fuck, I hope so.
Has to.
I've said
But
it
how
twice.
does
it,
it-
sorry.
it doesn't make sense to me that the domestic, like we all live in a community, in a family. We all know people who are younger, who are our friends, who are our kids. Their friends are my daughter's friends are my friends. You know, as a society, we have actually moved on. So if you look at groups of people, it is no longer children are seen and heard. You know, grandmas are treated with respect. Your mother's friends are called auntie. You know, all of those barriers, in a way, in our society have been broken down. So why aren't those barriers being broken down in the workplace? Why do we suddenly, when we come to the workplace, have this issue with diversity? Because ageism is just a line in the sand of issues that started with people of colour, with women. It's now ageism, it's people with disability, it's people who are non-binary. You know, so in our normal everyday lives, we don't have that.
Because they don't, if I can quote my 28-year-old son, and I'm sorry for those people who heard this when I was speaking at Travel Days, they don't think we've experienced much. So when we talk about things, and you know, he smokes dope and all that sort of stuff, and he drinks and he's got women, and he says, "Oh, Mum, you wouldn't know what we're doing." And I go, "Are you nuts?"
I invented smoking dope.
That's right. You know, there is nothing that you are doing that we haven't done. And I said to him, and I'm sorry for those of you who've heard me say before, you get down on your freaking knees and you thank God for our generation, because we are the sex, drugs and rock and roll generation, and without us, you've got fuck all. There you go.
And the reality is that all of those things you spoke about before, you created rock and roll, they created the internet, created miniskirts, created gender equality.
What about contraception? Sorry for
keep
interrupting
going.
you.
Give them all, right?
And fighting Vietnam, and the first wave of feminism
Right.
was our generation.
Keep
It's the
going.
second
You
wave.
created the housing boom. You
Yes.
created the recession afterwards.
Yeah.
You created,
Yeah.
you know, the things that this generation have lived through are mammoth, right?
And the music.
And now, are they going to be able to change ageism
Absolutely.
in the media? Because I think
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to, and you have to be part of that change, because in 2056, those of you in the audience who are 20 or in your 30s, you'll be our generation. And in 2056 in New South Wales, 42% of you will be over 60. So if you think about the majority of the population getting there, who is actually going to do the work if you're not employing the 60-year-olds? How are our societies going to operate? So I think, why do we care about this issue? We care about this issue because the one thing we have in common, you know, if you're a white male, you're never going to be a coloured woman. But if you're a white male, you are going to be over 60 at some stage and maybe have some discrimination against you. So it's actually a universal issue. And it takes a really long time, as we all know who work in advertising, to change behaviour. And so we need to start now. We need to start having those conversations now.
But don't you think it's interesting? Sorry, I'm just cutting in
Oh,
here.
yeah, let's just go ahead.
I was going to give Sparrow a go.
Oh, let's go.
To the media people, if I can just tell a quick story, again, from where I work, forget the HR people, that we had some of the advertising girls come to us the other day and on Better Homes and Gardens and say, "Oh, we've got an issue with Bunnings and Better Homes and Gardens because they want the millennials, and they only want the millennials." And I thought, oh, there's that word again. Anyway, so I went, I don't know whether I think that's true. They probably want the millennials as well, but I'm sure they don't want just the millennials. No, they're going for the millennials, and the problem with the millennial market is they don't know what DIY means because it's a bit old-fashioned, so we need to change the word. I go, I don't believe that millennials don't know what DIY means. no, they don't. So we think we should change the word to modify. And I go, yeah, but you can't modify a deck if you want to build one, because there's got to be one there already. So you've got to change the word. Anyway, I said, look, I don't believe it. So from there on in, when I went to a pub or a restaurant, I picked the millennials. I could see a bunch of you here. And I'd go up and say, excuse me for interrupting you, I'm from Better Homes and Gardens. And all of a sudden you become a celebrity. If you're Better Homes and Gardens. I'm from Better Homes and Gardens. I love the TV show. No, I'm on the magazine. So can you tell me what DIY means? And they all look at me a bit crazily and go, do it yourself, of course. Now, of about 200 people, only one, who was a young Indian guy who just arrived in Australia and was working behind a bar, because I asked everybody, he wasn't sure. But see, that's the thing, and it doesn't matter how much I tell those advertising people, no, Bunnings don't just want the millennials, they want them as well as, and please, millennials do know what DIY means. They don't listen. So it's not about we have to change. How do we get the younger generation to hear the experience that we've had, and that we're not trying to take over the world again, but we just are trying to impart the knowledge and the experience that we've got about what's going on out there, particularly with the baby
You brought me to a
boomers.
point we were going to cover later, but
how do they value the wisdom? I mean, it's a crying shame.
And to be honest, the other part of it is brands say quite often in private briefings that they've got enough 60-year-olds, they need to bring the younger markets in. So if they don't advertise to the 60-year-olds, they won't lose them.
Exactly.
And they actually actively say that in rooms.
I think there's
I don't need to spend on this demographic because they're not going anywhere if nobody else advertises here either.
There's a
we'll all be
perception
okay.
perception that people over 30 are brand loyal, don't change their brand.
So 86% of people in our survey said they would shift.
Because, we're all changing our brands the whole time. So there's never an audience that's done and dusted. And, we come across that all the time.
Would you shift for a better offer?
I shift every 5 minutes.
Do you shift?
I just changed my bank for 40 years a couple of weeks ago.
You're in the window. Once you pay off your house and you're thinking about the future, you change banks, don't you?
But you totally shift, and you're adaptable and you're resilient and you're all those, great things. So we're not just stuck in this.
No.
Yeah, and
The reality
deal.
Yeah.
I was going to say the reality is that we're the same as everybody else. So I think almost we're pigeonholing ourselves here, going we're old, crusty, whatever. We're just the same. There's no difference really. We're changing brands. Someone in their 20s is changing brands. Someone who's 8 is changing a brand. So there's no difference.
No. There's harder phases in life to change brands, though. We know that once you've just taken a mortgage, it's much harder to turn it off. Things like that. There are times in life where it's harder to switch. Harder to switch your telco when you're inside the 24-month plan, right? That's not age-related.
Yes.
That's tenure-related. So, Sparrow.
Oh.
You've had quite an experience with workforce diversity and experience.
Yeah, well, I guess...
Tell us a story. How do you feel about workforce as an experience?
Well, no, just recently when I left my job, hundreds of people said, congratulations on your retirement. Literally hundreds of people. And I was like, I'm not retiring. I've still got stuff to give. I can still make a difference. I've still got the energy and the passion for what I do. And just some people just thought I was ready to, once again, play bowls or retire on the Gold Coast. So to me, it was just a crying shame that people just automatically went, you're done. You're ready for retirement. And I just go, what a crying shame that wisdom isn't valued or that. And I want to share my knowledge. I want to help people and pass that on. Why do you think it isn't valued? Honestly, sometimes it's economical. It might be a commercial decision. Literally going, those people have been here a long while, they earn high salaries, and, how do we, once again, we're all trying to improve ROI and cut costs and be more effective. So I think it's some commercial, and then, once again, advertising is a young business, but surely you need those mentors and those coaches.
We keep saying it's a young business. Yeah. I think what we're seeing at the moment is an age of transition. So we are very connected still to the last generation, which was my parents' generation, for example, that did retire, that did have retirement plans, that did kind of have a way of living retirement. So, and that probably happened for 200 years. Since the Industrial Revolution, people had those use-by dates. We, as the generation who invented sex, drugs and rock and roll,
No use by date.
We don't have that level of use by date. Part of it is economics. Like, I'm going to probably live till I'm 90. Am I going to stop working at 60 or 65? Economically, it doesn't make sense. Physically, it doesn't make sense because I'm far more active than my mother was at my age. I'm far more connected to popular culture than my mother was at my age. So I don't have a role model. So the way people actually view us is they don't also have a role model. We're that first generation that's making that wave, that's saying, hey, we are different. Like, you know, the story I was telling you when I went grey, I actually made a conscious decision not to dye my hair. And the way I've been treated since is so different. Like, people actually treat me like I'm a nana. And I'm not a nana. People ask me whether I have a senior's card. People get up on the bus for me, which I love.
I wish they'd do that for me.
So, you know, I thought, wow, you know, all I did was change the colour of my hair, and it's actually on fashion. It's on brand.
Bleaching mine that colour.
So it's just that kind of notion about a transitional stage where we see old people as our parents and our grandparents' generation, and we're going to break that mould. Hopefully we're breaking it for you here today.
It might make it easier for this whole generation in
Julia,
this room.
how do you, I mean, you don't see yourself with a
I'm
use by
so
date.
much older than you, it doesn't even bear talking about. I could have a senior's card 10 times over. And no, I don't. I don't see myself as old, and I love working with all these young people because they keep you thinking fabulously, and they keep you contemporised in a certain way. Not entirely, because I think there's lots to learn, and I don't know that this generation, the millennials, have had as good a time as we did. So we're slightly different, but I always think that what happens is they see me like this, and I see me from inside, because if you ask a baby boomer, if they didn't know how old they were, I saw this on a card in America, if you didn't know how old you were, how old would you say? I'm 25, but most baby boomers will not go over 32.
Okay.
So in here, you are not the person out here. And I remember my mother once said to me, I was putting her rings on and I was much younger, and she said, "Oh my God, look at your hands." And this is the absolute truth, and take this away with you. She said, "I can't tell you what it's like to feel 17 and be trapped in an 80-year-old body." And that's what it is. We are trapped in our physical case, which in no way represents what's inside. So when you see me, you're seeing a woman over 65, but in here, I see the 25-year-old that I was. So it's hard to marry the two.
How do we get the industry to see the woman that's 25?
Can I answer a slightly different question? Because I think just going on from Charmaine's point about experience as well, that it's really good for a workplace culture to have a mix of ages in the way that we're really pushing diversity in terms of gender. And it's great to hear from Kirsty that, you know, you've got such a broad age range in the agency, because that is so unusual. But, I mean, I love it. Our global strategy director is 48, and she is the coolest, you know, most on-trend woman, directing the cultural positioning of Target in the US, which is one of the biggest companies in the US, working alongside their head of social strategy, who's also 47. And the pair of them are just the coolest, you know, most on-trend people you've ever met. But they're working really closely with a team of really young strategists. And that's amazing too, that we've got the 22, the 25-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, and one 50-year-old. I hopefully we'll get to change that. all working together. And that's a much richer workplace culture because we're not all having the same background. We don't all have the same way of thinking. You know, we've all come from different places. And I know when I was made a manager, when I was 25, I thought I was awesome. And so I recruited a team who were all like me. And we were all good at what I was good at, and we were all really shit at what I was really shit at. And it was actually, in retrospect, a complete disaster because we all thought the same way, and we all had the same background, and we all did a certain thing. But there was so much that we didn't know. And I think it is having that range of age and experience. And, you know, and I think it's as exciting to think about ageism for young people too, because there is that thing, oh, you can't be promoted because you're 25 and you don't have 4 years experience. No, if you're the right person,
That's gone now too,
you've
isn't
got
it?
the job.
I'm not sure I agree that recruiters would agree with you.
No, I talked to a few
I
recruiters.
disagree with that
Go on.
because a recruiter, I just changed my LinkedIn profile and I was updating it. And I actually stopped updating it because I was going to put 40 years of experience. And I went, I'm actually not going to do that because a recruiter who didn't call me back, who was looking for somebody that I had all the credentials for, right? Someone recommended me because he has the CV for that role, you know, it'd be brilliant for it. And they looked at my LinkedIn profile and they've obviously worked out, he went to school there and he's got 40 years experience and they didn't call me. So I agree with your sentiment, but there are recruiters and there's people in this world that look at your LinkedIn and just wipe you off. So therefore, like, that's great, but in the real world, like, forget it, I'm being discriminated against.
We're not disagreeing, we're agreeing.
Right.
Because I remember, again, when I was in a management position in my 20s, someone was put forward to me who was in their 30s. They were about 10 years older, and I was like, blimey, I can't work with him. I remember it so clearly, almost with shame. I can't work with him, he's old. He was probably 36, and I was 28.
Yep.
And I thought he was past it.
So
I get it.
I think this comes, though, to the issue that the modern world faces, which is primordially we are set up to hang out with people like us, right? As tribes, that's how we survived and fought against the other tribe. People like us are important to us. It's in our kind of primordial memory. But what the data is telling us is that if we actually hang out with people who are not like us, that the bottom line, the world changes, things actually happen. You know, you get to eat better food, for example.
We know that works.
More interesting stuff. But somehow that primordial brain comes into force, and we're not actually questioning that. So there's a lot of people who are hiring people like them, like
That's
you
exactly
did when
the
you were
same,
25, which is why women are still a minority, you know, and we are 53% of the population. We're not represented because most of the people hiring us are men, and they choose people like them. I spoke to a few recruiters in the lead up to this, and what they said to me was, if you are looking for a new job at your age, do it while you're in a job.
Yeah.
If you leave a job, it's harder.
Yeah.
And do it soon, they told me. Don't keep it any longer. And they all said to me, you know, they're people I knew, said to me, you've got a great reputation. Of course you're going to get a job, but don't leave it too late.
Isn't that scary?
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, and they're only reflecting what they see in society. I
Exactly.
mean, that's what media is reflecting. Media
Totally.
as an industry is reflecting ageism because it's receiving ageism.
It's interesting, though, that in culture, that there's a really diverse range of ages, and some of the most exciting people culturally, globally, are older. So think J.J. Abrams is responsible for the Star Wars, Star Trek network. He's incredible. You've still got Tarantino. You've got Giorgio Armani, who's 84, still absolutely innovating in fashion. I saw the most incredible interview with him this week. You know, Brad and Clooney, they're not doing their gardening. They're still rocking it in Cannes, and
Yeah.
everybody is looking at them.
But we have
You know,
no
there's-
shortage of people to
there's-
write about online. There's
there's-
just nothing.
Yeah.
And so
missing.
culturally, David Guetta,
Yeah.
he's sold out with his residency in LA.
He's not gonna get
in
a job in
Vegas,
marketing,
rather.
though.
He's 51.
Yeah.
So culture
But he's
is
not going to
still...
work in
He's
an
not going to work in
agency.
advertising or an
No,
agency.
but it's really
he won't get a
interesting.
job at any of the holding companies.
And we should be
He won't,
one of the
but-
most innovative industries because we reflect culture. We talk about culture all the time.
And
So
I
there is
think-
that. It's interesting.
But we
Yeah.
don't
We
actually
don't. We
reflect
don't.
culture.
We don't reflect it.
But the
No,
problem
we
is,
should though.
Yeah, we should. I agree.
We should.
the problem is, and I'm probably nearly the oldest person in our company, I would think. The problem is that you have so much fun working with the younger ones because you don't think too differently, and it's sort of like, and here's another sex analogy. It's like apparently the best partnership is an 18-year-old boy and a 60-year-old woman, because that's where the energies and one teaching the other and the long goes, and it's not
Always
necessarily
risque, Julia.
not the 18-year-old teaching the 60-year-old. But anyway, so it's sort of like that. You can have the best time together. So I'm surprised that the learnings from both haven't actually become more widespread, because there's so much that each of us has to offer each other that
True.
I don't know why that.
Workplaces have to learn. I mean, we have a workplace with people who are 70 and people who are sort of 18, 21, all of it.
Great,
And
isn't
it is fantastic.
Yes.
And people play different roles as well. And they play different roles in different projects as well.
And
they
we've
flip
got
around.
stuff to learn too.
Yeah.
Like,
Of
I
course.
learn
Well, that's what
every
happens.
day.
Of course.
That's what happens.
From
Somebody
my
picks up
team.
digital skills from over here, and somebody
Yes.
goes societal values from over here. And together it creates a melting
But
pot
in
of what we should do
agencies,
next.
there's this, if you're not a digital native, you don't get digital. Or there's this whole sort of bit of a stereotype around, old school thinking, which just doesn't exist. It's
Well,
bullshit.
digital's just communication. I
Totally.
mean, that's the other part of this is before digital was
Not
other
digital.
forms of communication. Telephones, we had them.
Yeah.
They had a dialy thing on them, but you still used them.
Yeah.
I love those young people in our office who can fix my digital thing, because I
The
can
young
get an email doing that and not know how to bring it straight again. They're fantastic, Bring them
You
on.
just showed your age there,
Let's
I
get
think.
to the solution, because ultimately we're all here talking about a problem that we're faced with that cause issues in your parts of the world, in the area that I represent in. For the people here looking around the room, not too many of them are over 50. We've got a few. We've got a question.
I do have a question. Because I've just got one question, which is, what would happen if we didn't say we're different based on age? What would happen if we took age out of the equation, stopped using generational labelling, and started to think about who we are as people,
Exactly.
beyond age, beyond generational
Be fabulous.
Awesome.
Yes,
So-
wonderful.
Why don't we?
Because
Why don't we?
we've
Because
done it
it's-
for, the boxes. I always say you need to have a box party rather than a 50th or a 60th, because I'm in the penultimate box and it's really scary, right? I don't have another box to tick after I tick the last box. So what happens to me? Like,
At least you can tick, I suppose.
do I disappear
okay, Charmaine, I'll look after you
I'm
at 60.
65 and over? So I think we live in a society, and that's what we're trying to change, right? And I think we've done a really good job of it, having lived this far and been a woman who is different to the norm, and fought against that, and kind of made it, So we are fighting against it, and it's really, really important that we keep doing so, and that we don't talk about young people and old people, that we talk about people.
But I have one of the most destructive words that's come into the language is millennials. They were Gen Y. We had Gen X, Gen Y and Gen Z. Now there's this group who have what is a much more romantic, dynamic, cutting-edge name, which is the millennials.
Good
And-
marketing.
Yeah, and I think that's a big divider for us, because we talk about always, what are we going to do with the millennials? How do we get the millennials? No, what about the Gen Z people? And what about the bottom end of Gen X? So that, I think, has been one of the issues that blocks what you're saying. But if we could do what you're saying, it would be sensational. I mean, how many old people do you know at 33? They're so dreary and boring and, they don't go out and everything. How many fabulous people do you know at 75?
Julia goes out more than me, and I'm 43.
And I could be your mother. But so it's that word has become a real issue. And even you go over to America, and Better Homes and Gardens over there is whopping. It's 7.5 million people a month, and they've just bought Time Inc. and everything. The big word for them, I went to all the meetings, millennials and video. And I thought, oh, God, please, can we just move on from this barrier that word's creating? Get rid of that, and we all work together, and it's fantastic.
So I went and saw Hearst, and they have good housekeeping. The average age of a reader behind a closed door is 57 years old. The average product being advertised is being targeted to a 32-year-old. And the editorial staff sit there and go, we've got this quandary. Everybody that reads our magazine, but we can't talk to them through our magazine. We have to sell the fact that we are talking to 32-year-olds to the advertiser. We have to lie about our age.
And I think that brands have a real responsibility, because in answering your question, in life we're ageless, aren't we? I'm going to a wedding in Italy next weekend. Yeah, must book my flight. And she's 27, and she's one of my best friends. We've got nearly 30 years apart. Hopefully she doesn't see me as an old person. We're just friends, and that's how we live our lives. And I think it's when it comes to media. And obviously employment is one thing, but then the way that the media is representing age is another. And I think, like anything with diversity, brands have a responsibility. And it was fantastic to see that campaign that Fern and the Dove team showed us earlier. The work that L'Oreal are doing around their golden generation. And I think the more we see that through media, the more the perception will change around age. And I'll encourage you all to have a look at this amazing campaign for Magnum. I imagine it's from the States, and there's this incredible person called Apfel, and she's one of the hottest influencers, and I think she's 97.
Awesome.
And she appears in loads of Gucci ads, etc., etc. She's absolutely incredible. Now, to date, Magnum have had ads with, sexy women in their bikinis, giving, ice cream a blowjob sort of thing. And suddenly we've got this awesome 90-year-old.
You just said blowjobs. You are on stage.
Did I? Oh dear. And a 90-year-old, just looking fabulous. And Lillian Apfel, her name.
They're going to get us off stage.
It's amazing. So I think as age starts being shown through media, then society will start changing.
So I'm going to wrap us up. We're going to go down the row, and we're going to say the one thing we could do in this room, each of us, to change something. Carrie.
If you are responsible for a brand, think beyond millennials.
If you're hiring, hire someone that can coach, mentor, and foster amazing talent. And that normally would be someone with experience.
I would say don't take no for an answer regardless of who you are. If you believe in it, just keep going forward.
Two things slightly. The first one is see the 25-year-old, not the baby boomer or the older one. And why don't you take up my son's invitation, which is, Mum, come and have a spliff, and you come and join us and we'll discuss it all on our balcony.
Nice.
It's okay.
What a wonderful panel, everybody. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. Round of
Thank you to
applause.
Cummins and Partners for sponsoring.
Thank you, Rebbecca, Carrie, Julia, Greg, and Charmaine. What a dynamic bunch.